We are joined here on the show now by our White House correspondent, Jon Decker. Jon, good afternoon.
Hey there, Jeremy. How are you doing today?
Doing well, sir. Thanks for joining us here. So let's talk a bit about...
Thanks for having me on, as always. Happy Friday to you. Happy St. Patrick's Day.
And likewise. Thanks for joining us here. Happy St. Patrick's Day to you. So kind of turning to some international news to some degree. We've learned that an arrest warrant has been issued by the International Criminal Court for Russian President Vladimir Putin's alleged war crimes in Ukraine. So can you break down what these alleged war crimes are and how practical this arrest warrant would be in tangible, real-world terms?
The ICC, the International Criminal Court, it's based in The Hague in the Netherlands. They allege that Vladimir Putin, President Putin, was behind and is behind a scheme for mass deportations of Ukrainian children from Ukraine to Russia. And these children have indeed been indoctrinated with Russian culture. They are being sent to live with Russian families, taught the Russian language. This is a war crime. And what's the practical effect of it? Well, it's certainly, there's the symbolism of it. There has never before in the history of the world been a member of the UN Security Council whose leader was accused of international war crimes. And that's what has happened with Vladimir Putin. Now, what does it mean for him? It means that if he were to travel to a country that is a signatory to the International Criminal Court, it would mean that if he enters into that territory, he could actually be arrested. So it's very unlikely that President Putin will travel, for instance, to the G20 summit, which happens in India in September of this year.
So how did, I mean, that kind of like effectively cuts him off from the rest of the world to some degree. How did he respond to that news, he being President Putin?
Well, that's right. Russia essentially right now is a pariah nation, and Vladimir Putin is seen as a pariah leader. How did Russia respond? Well, Vladimir Putin did not respond, but a person who speaks on his behalf, a Kremlin spokesman, responded, calling it outrageous, and also saying that because Russia is not a signatory to the International Criminal Court, by the way, neither is the U.S., that Russia would not comply with this arrest warrant. And it's no surprise at all. So it's very unlikely, for instance, Jeremy, that you're going to see a criminal trial anytime soon involving Vladimir Putin at The Hague.
That was my next question, but also, I mean, is there any sort of response from the White House or President Biden on the situation?
President Biden, the White House has not put out a statement on this. However, President Biden has commented on President Putin before and has said publicly that he believes that Vladimir Putin should be tried for war crimes. He wasn't referencing this specific allegation, but rather prosecuting this war in Ukraine and indeed entering into the sovereign territory of Ukraine. That in itself is a violation of the UN Charter.
Now, of course, Russia seems to be building, if you will, a relationship between Russia and China. Of course, President Putin meeting with President Xi Jinping on Monday in Moscow. So what is the purpose of that meeting, and what could come out of this visit?
President Xi is traveling for this several-day visit to Moscow for this state visit at the invitation of President Putin to demonstrate the bond, the alliance that Russia and China have. But China put out a statement saying that he is going to Moscow as a peacemaker. And indeed, just a few weeks ago, China offered up what it referred to as a 12-point peace proposal to try to bring about the end of the war between Russia and Ukraine. That peace proposal didn't amount to much. Actually, it didn't call for Russia to remove its troops from the sovereign territory of Ukraine. That being said, Russia is trying to present itself as open to the idea of President Xi coming into China to certainly discuss the ongoing war in Ukraine, and China is trying to present itself as some sort of peace broker, trying to mediate the peace, perhaps between Russia and Ukraine.
Other Chinese news, we've heard from the Biden administration that they're demanding the Chinese owners of TikTok sell their stakes in that app or risk a possible United States ban. So why is the U.S. kind of putting this ultimatum out there?
Well, it's security concerns more than anything else, security concerns that have been expressed by the FBI director, Christopher Wray. The idea that TikTok is owned by a Chinese company. That Chinese company has an alliance essentially with the Chinese Communist Party, and there's a concern that China could actually access data on American cell phones. So that is the reason for what you might call an ultimatum that has been given by the U.S. To TikTok, which is either divest yourself of Chinese ownership or we will ban TikTok from being an app that can be used in the United States.
So are these concerns bolstered by support on the evidentiary front, or are they just more of an abstract concern?
Well, they're backed up by what the FBI has said. The FBI director has said that. Other intelligence agencies in the U.S. have said that. And, you know, although TikTok denies that it is a security concern, they have said that they are committed to bolstering their security with a significant investment in its security for its app. But they have not spent any money on that just yet. In fact, they've spent a lot of money on U.S. lobbyists trying to lobby American lawmakers not to vote for legislation that's now before Congress, which would ban TikTok in the U.S. That is bipartisan legislation that has been introduced by Florida Republican Senator Marco Rubio. So that's where things stand right now.
So, John, with your background as a lawyer, how do you kind of see these things playing out in the courts, if at all?
Well, I do think that this will ultimately be settled in the courts. During the Trump administration, President Trump also tried to bring about TikTok being banned in the U.S., but that was challenged in the federal courts, and the Trump administration lost. And similarly, TikTok has said that if the Biden administration goes down this road, that they will bring a lawsuit against the Biden administration in this regard. So I think it will ultimately have to be settled in the courts, which means this particular issue, Jeremy, will not be settled anytime soon.
Let's turn to some economic discussions. Of course, last week saw the collapse of the Silicon Valley Bank, among another venture capitalist firm as well. And so, you know, the collapse of these institutions led to some tumultuous days for the market. So today, Secretary of Treasury Janet Yellen assured lawmakers that the banking system is sound. So has these assurances from Secretary Yellen and from President Biden, have they calmed the markets at all? Have things kind of stabilized again since the collapse of these institutions?
They really haven't. You know, you look at the financial markets today, the Dow was down nearly 400 points, including a further decline in the stock of another mid-sized bank, Republic Bank in New York, which had to be propped up through an infusion of cash coming from other banks, other lending institutions. And in addition to that, the entire sector of mid-market banks, small regional banks, have also been hit hard, not only today in the stock market, but throughout the week. So the financial markets are not yet calm as it relates to those assurances that were given earlier this week by Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen.
All right. Well, John, again, thanks so much for your time and your expertise and your insight. We'll have more, of course, as we talk to you again in the future.
Thanks, Jeremy.
Again, it's our White House correspondent, Jon Decker, discussing all the fast-moving developments in Washington, D.C. and beyond. We're going to have more from John here on the show as things continue to develop, so make sure you stay tuned for all of the details and the latest there.